Newsfirst, Newsline.
And a very good evening to you. This is Newsline Zoom. And our guest tonight, joining us all the way from the hill capital of Sri Lanka, Kandy, is Professor Buddhi Marambe from the Faculty of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya. No stranger to our program, of course. Welcome, Professor Marambe.
Thanks, Faraz, for getting me on once again.
Thank you for joining us again. Obviously, there's serious concern. A recent report has said that Sri Lanka's children are severely malnourished, and that's what's come about from a latest report. This is happening amidst a significant economic crisis, and the likes of which has never happened in Sri Lanka since independence. So as long as people can remember. Why is this, Professor Marambe? Is it to do with the dollar crisis? What is it? Why are our children having to suffer?
Well, thanks, Farah. This is an important subject area of interest to many. I'm sure everyone has heard that in the recent past, people are discussing about food security and human nutrition aspects that are brought into the picture because of the economic crisis that we are facing. That is true. But please keep that in mind. Malnutrition, or we usually consider it in two segments called undernutrition or overnutrition. That is not purely because of the situation that we face right now. To tell you for us, I'm sure looking at the statistics, I'm sure you will understand that malnutrition is a perennial problem in Sri Lanka, has been a perennial problem. And the way it goes, it's highly likely that it will continue to be there in a much severe manner in the foreseeable future as well. So my first response to the question that you asked, is it because of this economic crisis? Not necessarily, but that would have also contributed to a certain extent when you look at the statistics.
Now, whilst we started getting this report, I have also been keeping a track of the throughput at the various economic centers. And I spoke today, ahead of this program, with members of the staff at the economic center up in the hills. And they told me that normally, in ordinary times, I mean, pre the crisis, that they used to do approximately 175,000 kilos of produce throughput through the economic center. But that figure today, for example, was 75,000 kilos. So it's literally halved. And further investigation about that meant that it is not the big-time farmers who are being affected, but rather the smallholders, the people with the 1 acre and the 2 acres and the 3 acres. And more in-depth sort of investigation revealed that they simply don't have the money to pay for the fertilizer. The fertilizer that goes into the non-rice production is trading at about 360,000 to 400,000 rupees a ton, meaning around 20,000 rupees for a 50-kilo bag. And apparently the smallholders simply can't handle that financially, and so they've simply let their lands go to not being tilled. So what is this suggests then that poverty will increase. What's your take on that, Professor?
You're quite correct. Your explanation was very, very clear to let everyone know of the actual ground level scenario that we face for us. Again, although I said the current economic crisis have contributed partly to whatever the statistics that we showed, the impact of the current economic crisis will lead to more malnutrition, especially undernutrition in the future. What you said, what you explained a little while ago, it's one side of the story, of course, that will definitely give a rise, and there are enough enough ammunition or enough material that we can think of to plan for
Mm.
future to avoid such a calamity in Sri Lanka. For us to give you a bit of an explanation here, all what you said little while ago actually give rise to a chain reaction, or it will end up in a kind of a vicious cycle that we speak of. What is meant by malnutrition, on the other hand, we are worried about undernutrition, of course. Forget about the overnutrition part for the time being. But when it comes to undernutrition component, which is an important segment within malnutrition, I mean, you are looking at a society with ill health, isn't it? With a society with ill health, how are we trying to talk about a development, economic development for us? Naturally, that will be I mean, that will be facing a real problem. The economic development will be facing a real problem with a society with undernutrition in the future. And when it comes over there, when the economic development is lowered or there's a downturn, naturally poverty will rises. And what you said little while ago is a kind of a reflection of what is happening right now, which in turn will lead into a society with lower supply of nutritious food. With lower supply of nutritious food, naturally there will be a problem with respect to health once again. So this continues for us, naturally.
But you know, I'm deeply concerned for the very young, the most vulnerable, because malnutrition or undernutrition will lead to stunted growth, for example, reduced IQ. And these things are like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. And it is, you know, we finished one war in 2009, but this is an altogether new war because this affects the future of our country. I'm not, you're much younger than me. So, you know, I'll be gone, but this country will be left with a serious problem. And it is incredible that one of the most significant policy mistakes ever in this country was the overnight move to make Sri Lanka an all organic farming state, which is simply impossible. Common sense would have dictated totally otherwise. So how can we very quickly get out of this problem?
It's a difficult task. It's a Herculean task, I must tell you. You can change the tables upside down within a flash. In other words, you can destroy everything in seconds for us. But reviving it's not going to be easy at all. We have to speak the truth at this stage. We cannot say everything will be okay by tomorrow, day after, or in a season's time. No, it will take at least another year, looking at all the initiatives taken by the government of Sri Lanka and the contribution of the general public towards achieving this objective. It will take at least another year to revive back. I mean, in other words, at least to go back to the state that we were in before this national decision was taken. For us, this is the issue. You are quite correct. It's not only, I mean, turning everything upside down in the short run, assuming that organic farming will work. Even in the long run, a whole country, of course, if you want to convert the whole country into organic farming, you can do that. But for what purpose? This is a question that I've been asking every time. If food security or the nutritional requirement of our own population is the target, then such a decision will not help us at all, not in the short run, and not even in the long run. Even if you try to implement such a policy, staggered, stepwise in the long run, that is not going to achieve the targets for us. So once again, I'm glad that the government of Sri Lanka has decided at last to go back on the decision that they made. But still, there's a lot of hard work that has been done at the ground level to make sure the overall revival of the agriculture sector as well as food security will take place. That will take time for us.
Professor Marambe, speaking as a citizen of this country, which you are, do you feel, you know, we read in the press and we've covered it on TV and so on, that there is a sort of legal matter ongoing in terms of trying to hold certain people responsible for the economic crisis. But do you think that as a citizen of Sri Lanka, speaking purely as a citizen, do you think that there is also a case to be brought against people who decided to overnight abandon this whole import of fertilizer and go for an overnight all organic farming community? Do you
This
think
is
we
a
ought to do
crime.
that?
This is a crime actually for us. And one of the biggest problems of our rulers usually, I mean, coming back since we gained independence to the best of my knowledge, that they are not accountable and not responsible. This should never happen in the future. And this is a classic case that we have to definitely find the culprits. And of course, there should be a penalty for whatever the things that they have done to the Sri Lankan economy, especially Sri Lankan agriculture. And look at the statistic that you were showing from the very beginning about the malnutrition. For us, I was looking at the October monthly news bulletin, health bulletin issued by the Ministry of Health. If you look at the underweight population under the age of 5, that means less than 60 months old, the percentage of underage people compared to 2021 October, which was about 12.2%, has gone up to a staggering 15.3% in October 2022. Okay, let's not credit everything to the fertilized thing, but let's understand what an irrational decision can do. So nobody should be allowed to go scot-free for us. That's as a citizen. That's my fervent hope as well. And people, when they need to be punished, they have to be punished. Just saying sorry will not serve the purpose.
No, it won't, because it has long-lasting effects. Sometimes,
Exactly.
Sometimes it's generations that are affected. For example, the Easter bombings. It's one of what I would say 3 major events in this country where nothing much has come about, and one would be the what is referred to sometimes as the bond scam. And that has not been brought to a legal conclusion whatsoever. Either way, the people, the journalists, our Newsfirst network, this program highlighted it time and time again. And it is very sad that after we highlighted in 2015, 7 years later, there is no legal conclusion to that issue. Number 2 is how amazing it was that in May, people came out of Temple Trees, a very secure location, but they came out armed with all sorts of poles and pulleys and all that, and attacked the peaceful protesters at Galle Face. Up to today, we don't see anything to do with that aspect, although peaceful protesters and so on at Aragalaya have been arrested, questioned, sometimes remanded, and so on and so forth. And of course, thirdly, the Easter bombings. It affected, like this fertilizer crisis, the Easter bombings affected our economy, lock, stock, and barrel. Foreigners were killed. And today we are trying to attract foreigners back into our country, having not addressed the cause and the mastermind and whatever it is of the Easter bombing. So, Sri Lanka just carries on. It traverses between one crisis to another. But at the end of the day, it is the people of our country who are holding and carrying the baby.
That's quite right for us. It's a pathetic scenario. This cannot continue in a country like ours. We are in a crisis right now. Let's try to overcome. Let's try to get through this, which whatever the cost going to be. But we cannot forget the damage that has been done to the society. That's a saying in UK. I've seen in many films bring this kind of saying that somebody will have to go to jail. That somebody will have to be the real culprit. And that will be a lesson learned for all of us, all of our politicians, including academia, scientists, and our younger generation, to set sight for future, that all the decisions that we take, all the advices that we give to politicians, people who do that should be made accountable and responsible for the advices given and for the actions taken.
Of course, whilst as we approach a break, I'd like to remind everybody that in Korea, 4 previous presidents have been jailed. Some have been released on grounds of ill health or whatever it is. But the fact is that the judiciary there managed to actually jail 4 people, having found them guilty and exhausting all the legal processes along the way, found 4 presidents of Korea, South Korea, in jail. And in Malaysia, we have the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who is serving a hefty sentence for his part in the 1MDB scandal and so on and so forth. So what chances for Sri Lanka to show off its independent judiciary in the light of what's happening in our region? We'll get that answer when we come back after this short break. And we're, of course, in the company tonight of Professor Buddhi Marambe from the University of Peradenia's Agricultural Faculty. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. We are in conversation with Professor Buddhi Marambe from the University of Peradenia, the Agricultural Faculty there. Professor Marambe, so what do you think? What are the chances of Sri Lanka joining regional countries in upholding the law, upholding the fact that people in officialdom must be held responsible and not simply get away with it and live in some comfort in their retirement, whilst the rest of the country is paying dearly, and future generations too, paying dearly for the so-called mistakes people make, whether it is because they didn't get the right advice or whether it was for political gain or whatever. What chances do you think?
Looking at what has happened in the recent past for us, frankly, the chances seems to be slim. But we cannot go ahead like that. I mean, forget about what's happening in other countries. Look at the damage done to this country's agriculture that has been performing relatively well. Export agriculture, especially with respect to main crops, have been performing relatively well. Look at what happened in all those efforts that we have put forward or put into over 70 long years that have been, that the whole thing has been changed upside down, as I told you a little while ago. Now, who the responsible party is, whatever the political powers that they are in, they have to be brought in front of justice. I mean, we have to make sure people who destroyed Sri Lanka's economy, people who contributed to destroying Sri Lanka's agriculture, will have to be taken into task, not on a personal agenda, but basically to make sure there will be a message in place for future that our country's decision will be taken based on people's will and also will be based on scientific facts and figures that are there. That's an important message that everyone would get through such decisions that have been made.
And Professor Marambe, going back to the time when the government was proposing this all-out ban on the importation of chemical fertilizer, what did your faculty do? You are working in the agricultural faculty, and so you must have some specialized knowledge in this. What did you do? What did your department do?
At the beginning for us, from the time this decision was taken and the cabinet decision was announced, more importantly, when the Gazette notification came up, giving some kind of legal backing for the decision made, that was on 6th May 2021, academia as individuals came forward based on their specialties and so on, trying to express their views, saying, and we're pleading that the government should go back on this decision. But later, it's interesting, ironical and interesting, the faculties of agriculture, not only the leading faculty of agriculture at University of Peradeniya, but all 7 faculties of agriculture got together and tried to put forward ideas to revive the agriculture sector in Sri Lanka. That's the most important part. At least the academia and scientists were brought together due to such crisis scenario, as everyone understood the irreversible reaction that is going to have, the decision going to have onto our ecosystem, our human civilization, as well as human health. And that's how I think most likely the pressure was created on the government of Sri Lanka at that time, including the pressure that came from the ground level by the farming community who are actually in the business of agriculture and tried to provide a lot of contributions to the Sri Lankan food security, also created a lot of pressure, and the government of Sri Lanka decided to go back on their original decision. So all those things contributed a lot to these type of scenarios in Sri Lanka that we are experiencing at this particular moment.
And Professor Marambe, tell me, Sri Lanka, we are obviously in a huge crisis. The various people involved in finance are arguing about, we had Governor Cabral, former Governor Cabral saying that, the dollar is pegged at 203 or 205 in his time. And he's now saying, well, there's no difference in the pegging, accepting that it's pegged at a higher rate at 375 or thereabouts. And so all these arguments are going on. But none of this helps, because if you, I'm sure you as a professional, you must have noticed as a person from academia that the Sri Lankan government have not concluded their discussions with the people who have already lent them money. And the IMF want them to come to an agreement with those people prior to releasing any funds. Governor Nandalal, who's doing an absolutely grand job, he said that we hope to have at least the first tranche or some form of agreement by December. He's now revised his estimation to January. I don't know if it's an estimation or whether it is a guesstimation, but the problem remains. What, in your view, Professor Marambe, should the government be doing to increase the earning of dollars, the dollar earning strategy, as I call it?
Yeah, from an agriculture point of view, I'm not a financial analyst for us, but I must approach this subject from the agriculture angle. We all know we had a very good export agriculture history. Our tea has been performing very well. And due to this unfortunate decision for us during the first 6 to 7 months of this year, 2020, we have lost even about 10.8% of the foreign exchange earnings. That's big money in a situation like this right now that Sri Lanka is facing. So the most important part to get this export agriculture sector going and growing, and all the relevant incentives has to be granted. Otherwise, the export sector will not perform. We know that in general, the export sector performance has been good, but then that is not the point. If we are to gain dollars, earn dollars, and also to spend the foreign exchange earning onto the subject areas that create this foreign exchange earnings, that is something that we have to prioritize always. That is why for us, in our recommendations also, we have told the government categorically, if at all, in a resource-limited situation, if the government want to prioritize crop, we advise the government to prioritize paddy, of course, that's our major staple. Then maize, that's our major animal feed crop. Of course, that looks after nutrition a lot. And thirdly, but not in third in terms of ranking, is the tea crop sector and other export agricultural sectors. That will be the way out. If you are not moving towards an export-oriented system, especially in the fields of agriculture, we'll fail in our exercise, no matter what sort of theories that have been put forward.
It's as simple as that, isn't it, Professor Marambe?
Exactly.
What can people do? Sri Lanka has a very good and strong ethos in helping each other. We rank high. I remember that report some years ago where Sri Lanka ranked pretty high in the giving index. And whatever, that's our culture. If somebody comes to your house, however much you say to them, I don't need sugar, they will insist on pouring your tea with loads of sugar, guaranteed to send you to the nearest diabetic clinic. But that's part of the culture, not sending people to diabetic clinic, but sharing what they have. So in that context, what can the people do to help the needy children, the most vulnerable in society, who are financially challenged and so on? What can the people who have a little bit more, what can they do?
Well, what has happened in the current context for us, before answering your question very quickly, what we have lost is confidence. And there's a lot of uncertainty in people's mind right now, not only with respect to economy, but look at the food security part as well. The agriculture sector was playing a major role in Sri Lanka in achieving food security for more than 7 decades, as I told you. In a crisis situation like this, all those cultural habits that we have had need to come forward, at least in the short run, to assist each other. More importantly for us, rather than sharing, the most important component, as I feel it, is to make sure the domestic pressure on the food demand, I'm talking about the whole country, to minimize to the best possible extent. One of the ways that we can do is by reducing waste. If that contribution can come from every individual willingly, not inadvertently, but willingly, that will give us a leap jump forward, reducing the pressure on the demand of food so that the pressure on foreign exchange to import food will be lower. That's something that we have to look into. But on top of that, I do agree, sharing is going to work in such a situation. That's why we are promoting not just home gardens for us, but community gardens. Let the community get together, do certain gardens, not to say to provide all your requirements. No, at least part of the household requirements. And that is where sharing can start in the modern day context. I do agree with you, sir, for us.
How much more serious can this problem get? We are told that so many, 46, 47% of the children are undernourished, malnourished. Will it get worse?
If you just keep still, definitely that's going to happen for us. But I'm glad that when you look at the interim budget that was presented in August, and also the national budget for 2023, I'm not saying all components in budget is going to do a lot of good things to Sri Lanka, but some of the items that have been identified with respect to the agriculture sector, especially building up on food security laws, making sure there will be a food security action plan for future. If all those things work well, then the nose diving that we have right now, we have to initiate this U-turn, isn't it, for us? And I'm pretty sure that if you can move forward on these lines with the contribution coming from all quarters, all sources in Sri Lanka, we all together can convert this dip into a U-turn. Let's start initiating that from next year midway, so that we'll be through in years to come. I'm not saying all solutions will be there in the budget proposals and so on, unless everyone get together. Our politicians become more genuine in their decision making and action, more accountable and responsible. Of course, this country will move forward and will definitely come out of this very, very difficult scenario that we are facing right now.
Professor Buddhi Marambe, thank you very much for being on Newsline. Those are wonderful words, which I hope that our politicians and our legislators and those in power will take into account. Because after all of us, you, me, News First, everybody, we are really and truly interested in the people's benefit first and foremost. Thank you very much. And on that note, that's the way it was on Newsline Zoom this evening. Take care and do follow us, even though the football's impinged on our schedule, but it's all there. And it's all a bit of fun, isn't it? Football, that means. Take care. And as always, God bless you all.